I never thought my wedding would be the thing that shattered whatever fragile illusion I had about my family. I always knew there was a distance, an invisible line I couldn't cross no matter how hard I tried. But when my parents offered to pay for the entire thing, $150,000, no strings attached, they made it sound like a gift, a gesture of love. For the first time in 29 years, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I was finally accepted. That they saw me not as the obligation, not as the problem child, but as someone worth celebrating. That illusion didn't just crack. It detonated the moment I read the contract they quietly slipped across the table 1 week later. I'm Travis. I'm 29, live in Oregon, and I'm a civil engineer, one of those people who still actually uses math after college. I met my fiancée, Hannah, 3 years ago through mutual friends. She's thoughtful, grounded, kind in a way that makes people lower their guard. The kind of woman who remembers your coffee order after one hangout. We're getting married next spring, and we've been planning it together like a little team. It's been the one thing in my life lately that's felt safe, pure. But I should back up a little and explain where all of this began, because the wedding wasn't the first time my parents twisted love into leverage. It was just the first time I almost believed it wasn't a trap. Growing up, I always felt like the spare in my own family. My older brother, Ethan, was the golden child, varsity everything, honor roll, charming to a fault. I was the quiet one. I liked building things, sketching out bridges and skyscrapers in a notebook while my parents raved about Ethan's latest debate win or soccer trophy. I was never rebellious. I didn't sneak out or cause trouble. But I learned early on that in our household, attention was currency, and I wasn't holding the right kind. My mom, Diane, has a way of smiling at you like she's doing you a favor by acknowledging your presence. She's one of those suburban matriarchs who dresses like she's attending a charity brunch even when she's just going to the grocery store. My dad, Gary, is quieter, more reserved, but every bit as complicit. He's the kind of man who stays silent while the emotional damage happens right next to him, and then acts confused when you finally say you're hurt. I used to think he was just trying to keep the peace. Now I think he just didn't want to pick sides. Ethan could do no wrong, and I could do no right, even when I was trying my hardest. Every family vacation, every dinner table conversation, every Christmas morning, it all revolved around what Ethan was doing, what Ethan needed. When I got accepted into my college's engineering program with a partial scholarship, my mom's response wasn't congratulations. It was, well, thank goodness Ethan didn't choose that school. You would have been in his shadow again. I remember laughing like it was a joke, even though it burned. Still, I didn't grow up angry. I grew up resigned. I told myself I didn't need their validation. I told myself I was fine. And for the most part, I was, until we got engaged. When I proposed to Hannah last year, we kept it simple. Just the two of us, on a foggy coastal cliff, no social media blast, no audience. It was perfect. Her family was thrilled. Her mom cried on the phone, and her dad offered to help us build a little ceremony platform himself. My parents, well, they said congratulations, and then immediately asked when the wedding would be. Not if they could help. Not if we were planning something small or big. Just, so when's the date? It was like they were mentally slotting it into their calendar like a dentist appointment. Still, I didn't let it bother me. I was used to the indifference. But then, 2 months into the planning process, we invited both families over for dinner. It was the first time our parents were all in the same room, and I wanted it to be a warm, welcoming night, something that made Hannah feel like we were blending two families together. I cooked, Hannah decorated the apartment with candles and fairy lights, and for the first hour, things went okay. Her dad talked to my dad about fishing. Her mom and my mom bonded over centerpiece ideas. It was civil, and then, out of nowhere, Diane cleared her throat, lifted her wine glass, and said, well, Gary and I have decided we'd like to cover the wedding. Everything. No limits. You kids deserve a magical day. The room went quiet. Hannah blinked. Wait, really? My mom nodded, smiling like she was presenting an award. Really? We've talked about it, and we want to give you the kind of wedding you'll remember forever. I should have known something was off right then. But I was caught in the moment, swept up in this bizarre fantasy where my parents were suddenly generous, thoughtful, loving. I thanked them. I even got emotional, which is rare for me. I remember thinking, is this how Ethan always felt? Like he didn't have to earn it? Like love just showed up one day with no catch? We toasted. My dad nodded quietly in agreement, and Ethan, who had shown up late, just clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Must be nice." That comment stuck with me for a while, but I brushed it off. I assumed he was just being flippant, like always. I didn't realize yet that he already knew something I didn't. For the next few weeks, it actually felt good. My mom started calling more, asking about venues and florists, and I let myself believe the spell. I even told Hannah I felt like my parents were finally trying, that maybe they wanted to be involved in something important to me. We started touring venues outside of Portland. We found a perfect place on the coast, weathered wood, ocean view, wildflowers along the path. Pricey, but not outrageous. And since my parents had insisted they were covering it, we moved forward. And then, about a week after we put down the deposit, which I paid out of my savings, intending to be reimbursed, my mom asked if we could swing by the house for lunch. When we got there, it was just her and my dad, sitting at the patio table with a manila folder in front of them like it was a real estate deal. There were glasses of lemonade, homemade quiche. It looked innocent enough. "We just have a few things to go over," Diane said, flipping open the folder. It was a contract. At first, I thought it was just a checklist, something helpful, a planner's guide. But as I started reading, my stomach dropped. It was 6 pages long, typed, formal. It outlined their expectations for the event. Approval over guest list, veto power over venue choice, which we had already chosen, dress code enforcement, Hannah's dress, to be approved by mother of the groom, inclusion of Ethan as best man, family table arrangement plans that didn't include Hannah's siblings. It even specified a speech order, with my mother going first. At the bottom, in neatly spaced legal font, it read, "The undersigned agree that failure to adhere to the above stipulations may result in revocation of financial support at any stage prior to the ceremony." I looked up at them, heart pounding. "What is this?" My mom smiled. "Just a formality, sweetheart. You know, so we're all on the same page. It's not personal. We just want to make sure the wedding reflects our family's values." I stared at her like she'd just spoken a different language. I couldn't believe what I was holding. Hannah hadn't even read it yet. She was frozen, eyebrows furrowed, blinking in confusion. I said, "So if we don't agree to all of this, you'll just pull the money?" Gary finally spoke. "It's a lot of money, Travis. We have to be careful." The words echoed. "We have to be careful." Like I was a risk. Like I hadn't been careful my entire life, tiptoeing around their expectations, trying not to ask for too much. I didn't say anything then. I think I just stood up, took Hannah's hand, left the quiche untouched on the plate. We drove home in silence, the folder sitting in my lap like it was radioactive. That night, Hannah finally asked, "Did you know they'd do something like this?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to say this shocked me. But deep down, I think I always knew. I just never thought they'd put it in writing. And that was the moment I realized this wasn't about generosity. It was never about love. It was about ownership, control. They didn't see this wedding as a celebration of my future. They saw it as a chance to finally script the one event in my life where I might be center stage, so they could hijack it before I ever had the spotlight. But I wasn't about to let them. And that's when the real plan started to take shape. The week after the contract debacle, I didn't say much. Neither did Hannah. We kind of just floated in this weird space where everything felt like a dream you didn't want to talk about, because saying it out loud would make it worse. I kept thinking about the way my mom had smiled when she handed me that folder, like she genuinely believed it was normal. Like she thought I'd be grateful for the opportunity to hand over my wedding like it was a school project she was entitled to grade. We didn't sign it. That part is obvious. But we also didn't confront them. Not yet. I needed time to process. Hannah was livid in a quiet, shaking way. She didn't yell or rant, but she did take down all the mood boards she'd made for the wedding and put them in a box. When I asked why, she just said, "I need to know what we're actually allowed to dream about before I plan anything else." That one hurt. For a brief moment, I almost caved. The money was a safety net. Without it, we'd have to scale back everything. Maybe even delay the date. But then I thought about the clause that gave my mom the right to approve Hannah's dress. About the seating chart that exiled her little brother to some table in the back corner. About Ethan being installed as best man like a placeholder trophy. And I knew no amount of money was worth starting our marriage with that kind of compromise. I texted my mom a polite, "We'll be covering the wedding ourselves. Thanks for the offer." No anger, no accusations. Just a boundary. Her reply came within 5 minutes. That's disappointing, Travis. We were only trying to help. This is very hurtful after everything we offered. Classic Diane. Turning it around. Making it about her. I didn't reply. That was the beginning of the Cold War. Things started shifting after that. The invitations had gone out. Only to immediate family, since we hadn't finalized anything else yet. Hannah and I were still figuring out the budget, scaling down the guest list, looking at local vendors instead of the coastal venue. It was frustrating, but also kind of freeing. We could breathe again, make decisions without waiting for a signature of approval. But then I noticed the passive-aggressive texts. My mom would send Hannah links to wedding dresses with comments like, "This one's much more appropriate for your figure," or "This brand is more classy, don't you think?" Always with a little smiley face at the end. Hannah stopped replying after the third one. Then came the phone calls to my aunt, my mom's sister, where she'd conveniently forget to hang up the phone and leave voicemails of her chatting with friends. I know, because one of those voicemails ended up in my inbox with her laughing, saying, "Well, Travis is just being difficult. He's always been so sensitive. Maybe he's embarrassed that we offered so much." I played it on speaker for Hannah. She didn't say anything for a full minute. Then she said, "Your mom hates me." And she was right. That realization hit harder than I expected. Not just because of what it meant for the wedding, but because it meant this wasn't about me anymore. It never really was. My mom saw Hannah as a threat. Someone she couldn't control. Someone who wouldn't play along. And then Ethan started showing up. At first, it was subtle. A random visit to catch up. A quick drop-in while he was in the neighborhood. But then I noticed he always brought up the wedding. Every time. "So, you guys figured out what you're doing now that you bailed on mom and dad?" Or, "You sure you don't want to just let them help? You know mom lives for this stuff. It's her thing. You're kind of ruining it for her." I just brush it off. Laugh. Change the subject. But he kept pushing. I didn't realize at the time that he was gathering information. Then one night, I caught him slipping into our apartment building. I'd come home late from a site inspection. My shift had run long. And as I pulled into the parking lot, I saw Ethan heading upstairs with a bottle of wine and 2 pizza boxes. I assumed maybe he was visiting another tenant. He had a couple friends who lived nearby, but when I got to my door, there was laughter coming from inside. My door. I stepped in, and there he was, sitting on our couch, feet up, glass of wine in hand, and Hannah, looking visibly uncomfortable, but trying to be polite. I stared at him. "What are you doing here?" He grinned. "Chill, man. I brought dinner. Just catching up with my future sister-in-law." Hannah looked at me with a silent help-me expression. I forced a smile. "You could have called." He shrugged. Spur of the moment. I was in the area. It was awkward. I sat down, ate a slice of pizza, made small talk. Ethan did what he always did. Charmed the room, made jokes, acted like he was the glue holding everyone together. And then, halfway through dinner, he said it. "By the way, Mom mentioned she might still pay for the wedding. You know, if you guys come around." I think she dropped the contract. My stomach dropped. "She told you that?" He smirked. "Well, not directly. But she said she regrets how it went down. She's just waiting for you to be the bigger person." The bigger person. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. That night, after he left, I asked Hannah how long he'd been there before I showed up. "About 20 minutes, she said. "He didn't do anything wrong. But he kept asking weird questions. Like, what kind of honeymoon we were planning. If we were doing a prenup. Stuff like that." It clicked then. Ethan was reporting back. Feeding information to my mom. Playing middleman. Acting like he was brokering peace when really, he was scouting weaknesses. I blocked him the next day. No drama. Just enough. But that wasn't the breaking point. That came 2 weeks later. We were finalizing the new venue. A small vineyard just outside of town. Affordable, beautiful, and perfect for the scaled-back ceremony we'd come to love. It was an oceanfront, but it felt like us. We were picking out chairs when Hannah's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and went pale. "It's your mom," she said. "She just posted something." I took the phone, opened Instagram. There it was. A full post. Professionally shot photos of a wedding table setup. Elegant, gold-trimmed menus. Huge floral centerpieces. Captioned, "Excited to begin planning Travis and Hannah's big day? Can't wait to celebrate with all our loved ones next month. Hashtag Mother of the Groom, hashtag wedding plans." Next month. We hadn't even set a final date yet. The comments were pouring in. "Can't wait. So happy for them. Your son is so lucky to have a mom like you. Beautiful taste, Diane. Is this the actual venue? My mom had posted fake wedding photos and announced a wedding date we hadn't approved. I called her. She didn't answer. I called again. She picked up on the third ring. Hi, honey. Did you see the post? Yeah, I said, trying to stay calm. What is that? She laughed. Just a little something to get people excited. It's not set in stone. We haven't even chosen the date yet. Well, I figured I'd help move things along. You've been dragging your feet, and people keep asking me when the wedding is. It's embarrassing not to have an answer. I was speechless. She continued. Besides, that's the venue I would have chosen. So elegant. Don't you think it fits our family's image better? Our family's image. I felt something in my chest snap. This isn't your wedding, I said. You're not planning anything. There was a pause. Then she said, Travis, you're being very difficult. Maybe you're not ready to get married if you're this defensive. I hung up, not out of anger, out of finality. But it wasn't over. That same night, my dad emailed me. An actual email. Subject line. Clarification on family contributions. Inside was a PDF, again, professionally formatted. It outlined a new offer. They would still pay $100,000 toward the wedding if we used the venue they had chosen and allowed my mother to serve as event coordinator. It even had a clause stating that in the event of divorce, any gifted funds may be subject to reimbursement depending on circumstances of fault. I read that part twice. They were planning for reimbursement in case of divorce. That was it. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just about control. It was about legacy, image, ownership. My parents didn't want to help me start a life. They wanted to buy a front row seat to a performance they could direct. And if I stepped out of line, they'd pull the funding. Or worse, claim damages. I printed the email, put it in a folder, labeled it leverage. And for the first time in my life, I stopped trying to be accepted. I started thinking about how to take everything back. Everything they tried to manipulate. Everything they tried to own. And I realized, revenge isn't always about payback. Sometimes it's about freedom. Sometimes it's about finally being the one holding the script. And that's when I made the call. Not to them. Not to Ethan. But to someone else in the family. Someone who'd been quietly waiting on the sidelines. Someone with their own score to settle. For the first time in my life, I didn't reply with an apology. I didn't try to smooth things over. I didn't go to Ethan and beg him to stay out of it. I didn't chase after my parents, trying to explain how it all wasn't a big deal. I just stopped. It was like finally walking out of a room I didn't even realize I'd been locked inside. But that doesn't mean it didn't hurt. Because it did. A lot more than I expected. See, when you grow up in a house where love is transactional, you learn to normalize it. You don't call it control, you call it expectations. You don't call it emotional blackmail, you call it discipline. And when someone hurts you, you tell yourself they didn't mean to, that they love you in their own way. But now, staring at a literal contract threatening reimbursement if my marriage didn't succeed on their terms, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. It wasn't love. It was branding. And I was done carrying their logo. But knowing that didn't make it easier. If anything, it made the silence worse. For weeks, I heard nothing. Not from my parents. Not from Ethan. Not from the cousins who used to text me occasionally about holidays or birthdays. It was like I'd been wiped from the family group chat, literally and metaphorically. The final nail came when my aunt, Mom's sister, called me out of the blue. Travis, she said, after some hesitant small talk. I just want to say I'm sorry. I paused. For what? For not speaking up sooner. Diane's been difficult. I've seen it for years. I just always told myself it wasn't my place. There was a beat of silence. Then she said, You know they've been telling people you and Hannah eloped behind everyone's back, right? That you're hiding something. My stomach dropped. I haven't even gotten married yet. She sighed. I know. But Diane said she's cutting ties because you're being secretive. That you're disrespecting the family. I thanked her, barely holding it together, and ended the call. That night, I cried in the shower. Not the kind of movie cry where a single tear rolls down a perfect cheek. No, it was messy, raw, the kind of cry that makes your shoulders shake and your legs go weak. I didn't even tell Hannah. I didn't want her to worry. I didn't want to give my parents the satisfaction of knowing they'd broken something inside me. But in that breakdown, something else started to grow. Resolve. We scaled everything back after that. No more big vineyard venue. No more fancy caterers or floral designers. We scrapped the idea of a plated dinner and decided to do a food truck setup instead. Hannah's best friend's uncle had one. Mexican fusion, ridiculously good. And when he heard our situation, he gave us a massive discount. I picked up extra shifts at the firm. Hannah took on a few more freelance writing gigs. We set a new wedding date, quietly, privately. And slowly, the weight started to lift. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't Instagram perfect. But it was ours. I started noticing things I hadn't before. Like how Hannah never once asked for anything fancy. How she smiled every time we solved a problem together. How she hugged me just a little tighter after every setback. And something about that made me realize I'd spent so long trying to earn my parents' approval that I forgot I already had everything I needed. Hannah didn't love me because I was impressive. She loved me because I showed up. And I was finally learning how to do the same for myself. Then came the part one didn't expect. Success. Not the flashy kind. Not the social media kind. But the real kind. The kind that grows slowly and quietly and roots itself so deep that no one can yank it out. It started when my manager at the firm pulled me into his office after a particularly brutal week. "You good, Travis?" I blinked. "Yeah. What?" "You've been working like someone's chasing you." I chuckled. "Maybe they are." He gave me a long look. "Well, whatever's going on, keep doing it. Your numbers are great. Your last report blew the client away. I've got a lead project I'm moving you to. Higher pay. More responsibility. You ready for that?" I said yes before he even finished the sentence. It felt like breathing fresh air for the first time in months. From there, things started to shift. Hannah's writing picked up, too. One of her blog posts went viral on a parenting site, and suddenly she had regular offers from 3 different publications. She started smiling more, sleeping better. Her posture even changed, more confident. Like she was finally being seen the way I'd always seen her. We started saving. Not just for the wedding, but for a down payment on a house. We found a cozy 2-bedroom on the edge of town, modest but full of light. With a little help from a loan and our joint savings, we closed in February. I built us a dining table from scratch. She painted the walls herself. We were exhausted every night, but it was the good kind of tired, the kind that says, "This life is ours." And yet, I still kept that folder. The one with the email, the contract, the fake wedding post, the screenshots, the text from Ethan. All of it. Not because I wanted revenge yet, but because I knew one day they'd come back. They always did. And this time, I'd be ready. The next time I saw Ethan, it was purely by accident. I was picking up takeout from our favorite Thai place. He walked in while I was waiting at the counter, spotted me, and grinned like nothing had ever happened. Well, he said. "Look who finally came out of hiding." I didn't rise to it. Just grabbing dinner. He stepped closer. "So, word is you guys are actually going through with it." I stared at him. "What's that supposed to mean?" He shrugged. "Just that Mom thought you'd cave by now. She's been telling everyone you're postponing again. Guess she'll be surprised." I didn't reply. He lowered his voice. "Look, man, you know she's not going to let this go, right? She's been gearing up for a family meeting. Some big thing. Says she's going to set the record straight. You should just call her. Clear the air." I narrowed my eyes. Is that advice or a threat? He laughed, holding up his hands. "Hey, I'm just the messenger." My order was called. I grabbed the bag and turned to leave, but before I stepped out the door, I paused. "I'm not hiding," I said. "You guys just stopped looking." Then I left, and for the first time in years, I felt taller than him. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Hannah and I were finalizing wedding plans. Everything was simple, elegant, personal. Her sister was officiating. My best friend from college agreed to DJ. We had backup power in case the park's outlets failed, and a local bakery gave us a deal on a 2-tier cake. Nothing fancy, but everything felt intentional. Still, I knew something was coming. You don't poke a queen bee and walk away untouched. And sure enough, it came in the form of a letter. Not an email, not a text. A literal, handwritten letter in my mailbox. From Diane. The envelope was cream-colored, heavy paper, smelled faintly of her signature perfume, lavender and judgment. Inside were 3 pages, front and back, slanted cursive, perfect grammar. It started like this. "Travis, I've thought long and hard about how to reach you. Clearly you've decided to cut us out without explanation, and that's your choice. But I refuse to let lies and misunderstandings shape the narrative of our family." It only got worse from there. She accused Hannah of manipulating me, said our wedding would be a small, sad affair, that would embarrass our family name. She implied that we were squandering the opportunity to build something elegant and lasting. She even included a list of approved guests she expected to be invited. At the bottom, she wrote, "We'll be hosting a family gathering on the 5th to address this face-to-face. I trust you'll have the decency to attend. No RSVP, no option, just an expectation." That was the moment something shifted again. Not anger, not sadness, clarity, because this wasn't a family anymore. This was a PR machine, and I was just another asset they couldn't control. But unlike before, I wasn't powerless. I had documentation. I had truth. I had my own platform now, people who knew me, respected me, believed me. And I had something they'd never understand. Peace. Real, earned peace. And that was dangerous to them. Because for people like Diane and Ethan, peace isn't real unless they orchestrate it. So I didn't go to their family gathering. I didn't respond to the letter. I didn't explain myself. Instead, I made another call. This time to my aunt, the one who had apologized, the one who had quietly drifted from Diane's side and started asking real questions. "Travis," she said, "you don't know how many people are quietly cheering you on." And when she said that, I realized, they're not just watching. They're waiting. Waiting for someone to stand up and show that you can walk away, that you can build something without the strings. That legacy isn't defined by who raised you, but by what you rise from. And I wasn't done rising yet. It's funny how much power you gain once you stop asking for permission. Once I let go of the idea that I owed my parents anything, love, loyalty, explanations, I saw everything differently. I saw them differently. And I saw myself for the first time as someone who didn't need their approval to feel whole. That shift didn't just change me emotionally. It gave me clarity. It made me strategic. Because if there's one thing Diane and Ethan never expected, it was for the quiet, overlooked son to turn into a threat. But before I tell you what I did, you need to understand something about my family. Reputation is everything. My mother runs her life like a public relations firm. Every holiday card is a photo shoot. Every conversation is a press release. Every family member is a brand ambassador for her curated narrative. And in that narrative, Diane is the flawless matriarch holding it all together. Elegant, generous, beloved. Ethan is her crown jewel. And I was always the afterthought. Until I became the scandal, the embarrassment, the defector. Once I rejected the contract and stepped away from the wedding circus, Diane's carefully built image started to show cracks. She couldn't just admit her younger son had walked away from her money and control, so she spun the story. She told relatives I was emotionally unstable, that Hannah was isolating me, that we were rushing into marriage without family support. And for a while, I stayed quiet. I let her talk. Let her spin her story to cousins, friends, church ladies, Facebook acquaintances. But while she was busy controlling the optics, I was building something real. And I was about to shine a light so bright, her whole narrative would burn. It started with the guest list. Hannah and I had decided to keep things small, only people who genuinely supported us. But after that letter from my mother, I realized something important. There were others like me. People in the family who had always played along, who had kept their heads down, who had swallowed their frustrations with Diane and Ethan because it was easier than confronting the storm. Like my cousin Lena. Lena is 2 years older than me. We were close as kids, but she drifted away during high school. I always assumed she had just grown out of the family drama, or maybe just got too busy. But a few weeks after the elopement rumor spread, I got a message from her. "Hey Travis, I heard some things that didn't sit right with me. You free to talk?" We met for coffee. She showed up looking tired but sharp, like someone who'd had to grow up early. She hugged me like she was apologizing for something. "I always knew your mom was intense," she said, stirring her drink. "But I didn't know it had gotten this bad." I nodded. "She's rewriting the story now? Says we're cutting everyone out." Lena scoffed. "That's rich. I didn't even get an invitation to your engagement party. We didn't have one." She paused. "Are you serious?" She told everyone she hosted it. That was the first domino. Lena went on to tell me how Diane had quietly erased her from family events years ago, after Lena declined to attend one of Ethan's award ceremonies because her son was sick. She said I wasn't prioritizing the family, Lena said. Then I stopped getting invitations. Sound familiar? I told her everything. About the contract, the Instagram post, the letter, the reimbursement clause. By the time I finished, She was gripping her coffee cup like it might shatter. "Travis," she said, voice low. "I have something you need to see." She pulled out her phone, scrolled, showed me a photo from 2 years ago. Ethan at a charity gala, smiling for the camera with a woman who was not his fiancée at the time. Lena zoomed in. They were together for 6 months. Everyone knew. Your mom threatened to cut ties with anyone who said a word. My jaw clenched. I remembered that time period. Ethan had gone quiet, said he was focusing on work. Diane said he was figuring things out. Turned out he was cheating, and the whole family had protected the secret. Lena looked me dead in the eye. You're not the first person she's tried to silence. You're just the first one who fought back. That's when the idea started forming. The next few weeks, I became someone else. Not the quiet son, not the black sheep, not even the hurt child looking for validation. I became deliberate. Every interaction, every conversation, I tracked it. I saved emails, screen-recorded voicemails, screenshot text messages from flying monkeys. I knew Diane was watching my every move through mutuals and distant cousins, so I started posting subtle clues, photos of me and Hannah smiling while painting our new home, captions like, "Building something from the ground up, together." I wasn't clapping back. I wasn't playing her game. I was subtly undermining it. People started reaching out. Second cousins, family friends, even an old neighbor who used to babysit me and knew Diane from church. They shared stories, screenshots, passive-aggressive messages, backhanded compliments. It all painted the same picture. A woman obsessed with control, now unraveling as that control slipped away. And then came the real opportunity. My parents were planning an anniversary party, 30 years. A big, glamorous affair. They'd already booked the venue. Ethan was going to give a speech. The whole extended family was invited. Except me. But Lena was. And so was Hannah's sister, who, funnily enough, had a mutual friend working at the event space. That's when I made my move. I started planning something of my own. It wasn't sabotage. I wasn't going to crash their party or embarrass them publicly. That would just validate their narrative, that I was unstable, vindictive, out of control. No, my revenge had to be clean, elegant, undeniable. I called a local journalist who ran a blog focused on family dynamics, generational trauma, and the concept of going no contact. She wasn't a huge name, but her blog had a dedicated following, and her stories often went viral when shared in the right circles. I pitched her a story, how I planned my wedding without my parents, and discovered their love was always conditional. She was intrigued. We met for an interview. I provided evidence, emails, messages, screenshots, copies of the contract. I told her she could anonymize names, but keep the details real. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted truth. The piece went live the week before their anniversary party. I didn't promote it. Didn't tag anyone. Didn't post a single link. But I knew how my mother operated. She Google searched our names monthly, tracked mentions, monitored family online activity. And once the article started picking up traction, hundreds, then thousands of shares, someone was bound to send it to her. And someone did. Because 3 days before the party, I got an email from Diane. Subject, "How dare you?" It was 3 paragraphs of seething rage. She called me ungrateful, accused me of airing dirty laundry, said I'd embarrassed the family and permanently damaged our reputation. She said Ethan was furious, that guests were canceling, that people were asking questions. Then she made a final offer. If you want to fix this, retract the article. Issue a public apology. We'll forgive you, and we'll still pay for the wedding, if you're willing to do it the right way. I didn't reply. Instead, I called my manager at work and requested the time off I'd been banking. Then I got on the phone with the local food truck guy we'd hired. And then I called my aunt again. "Are you free on the 5th? I asked. She hesitated. "That's your parents' party." "Exactly." She paused, then smiled. "I'll bring the wine." On the day of my parents' anniversary, while they were hosting their glittering, tense celebration with half the family whispering about the article that no one could quite prove was about them, we hosted something else. A picnic. In our backyard. With folding chairs and string lights and mismatched dishes. We invited everyone who'd ever felt like a second-class citizen at Diane's table. The people who'd been disinvited, talked down to, erased, and rewritten. Lena, her brother, 2 old family friends, even a cousin who hadn't spoken to our side in years because of a long-forgotten incident Diane refused to explain. And we celebrated. Not just our upcoming wedding, Not just our freedom, but each other. And the beginning of something new. A family built on truth. And that's when I realized the real revenge wasn't in destroying Diane's kingdom. It was in building my own, brick by brick, with no contract required. The thing about revenge is, if you do it right, it doesn't look like revenge at all. It looks like peace. It looks like a quiet life you built with your own hands. It looks like folding chairs on a warm spring evening, a string of lights swaying in the breeze, and the sound of real laughter. Not the rehearsed kind people use to keep up appearances, but the deep, unfiltered kind that leaves your cheeks sore. That's what our picnic felt like. That's what freedom felt like. And while Diane and Gary were posing for photos in a hotel ballroom across town, flanked by centerpieces the size of toddlers and forced smiles from guests who had read the article but were too polite to ask, I was watching my cousin's son chase a frisbee barefoot across our yard. That night wasn't just symbolic. It was a message, a new beginning. But the fallout? That was the part one didn't even have to orchestrate. It started the very next morning. Lena called me first. Your mom's party ended early, she said, a grin in her voice. And not because of the food. Apparently, about halfway through the dinner service, someone brought up the article at their table. Not in a confrontational way, more like curiosity. Did you see that story going around Facebook? Sounds a lot like the Johnson family, doesn't it? My mom turned red. My dad turned pale. Ethan tried to laugh it off. But then someone else mentioned it. And another. And suddenly Diane's perfectly choreographed gala was buzzing with whispers. Not about her 30 years of love with Gary, but about the anonymous son who exposed his parents' wedding sabotage and the contract that came with their love. Guests left early. The speech Ethan had planned was never delivered. The photographer packed up while Diane tried to get ahead of the rumors. But it was too late. The story was out. And even if no one said it to her face, she knew they knew. The damage was done. Over the next few days, I started getting emails. Not from my parents. They were radio silent. But from relatives. Some were apologies. Some were subtle admissions. Some were just stories. One came from my dad's cousin in Arizona, who hadn't spoken to us in over a decade. She said she read the article and cried. Said it reminded her of how she'd been iced out of a family wedding for asking too many questions about finances. Another came from a former friend of Diane's from her book club. You always seemed like such a sweet boy, she wrote. I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening sooner. Your story made me rethink a lot of things. But the message that hit the hardest came from my grandmother, my dad's mom. She was 84, mostly quiet during family events, and had never once taken a side in anything. She sent me a handwritten letter, actual paper, with a check for $1,000 and a note that said, I can't undo the way this family has treated you. But I see you now, and I want to help. No contracts. Just love. I read that one out loud to Hannah. She cried, and I finally did too. Now, you might be wondering, what about Ethan? What happened to the golden boy? Well, that part was almost anticlimactic. A month after the anniversary party debacle, word got around that his company, a mid-sized marketing firm, had read the article and pieced together the connection. Turns out, some of his clients didn't love the optics of being associated with a family scandal involving emotional manipulation and a wedding contract. One dropped them, then another. His boss put him on temporary leave. According to Lena, Diane tried to spin it as cancel culture. But the truth was, Ethan had coasted for so long on charm and connections that the moment those connections started to question him, he had no substance to fall back on. The image cracked, and there was nothing underneath. We didn't talk. I didn't reach out. But he did try once. A short email. Look, I didn't mean for it to go that far. I was just trying to help Mom. I thought you were overreacting. Guess I was wrong. Hope you're doing well. I read it twice. Didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. My parents? They didn't show up to our wedding. We didn't expect them to. What we didn't expect was for them to send a letter through their lawyer 2 weeks before the date. A cease and desist accusing me of defamation and requesting the removal of the blog article. I forwarded it to the journalist, who laughed and replied, Tell them to take it up with my First Amendment rights. It was the last time I heard from either of them. Not even a Christmas card. Not a birthday message. Not a passive-aggressive Facebook post. Nothing. The silence that once terrified me now felt like peace. The wedding, by the way, it was perfect. No, seriously, not in the Pinterest board, 5-figure dress kind of way. It was perfect because it was ours. We got married under a tree wrapped in lights. Hannah wore a simple lace dress that she'd altered herself. My best friend officiated. My aunt, the one who'd finally stood up for me, gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry at the same time. We danced barefoot. We had tacos and churros and sangria in mason jars. When it rained halfway through the night, no one ran. We pulled out umbrellas and kept dancing under the stars. And somewhere between the music and the speeches and the quiet hand squeezes from the people who truly loved us, I realized I didn't just survive my family's betrayal. I grew from it. They had tried to buy my loyalty. They tried to trade money for control. And when I said no, they tried to erase me. But in doing so, they showed me exactly who they were. And in walking away, I discovered exactly who I was. A year later, the blog post still floats around. Occasionally, someone will email me, a stranger, to say thank you, to tell me their story, to say they finally found the courage to cut ties with a parent who used money as a leash. I don't regret a single word of it. And if I ever do start to waver, I walk into our living room. I sit at the table I built with my own hands, and I look at the wedding photo we framed on the mantle. Hannah, me, and a yard full of real smiles. Not a single person in that picture is pretending. Not a single person is posing for someone else's approval. And that's when I remember. Love without conditions isn't a gift you wait for. It's one you build, brick by brick, day by day, person by person. No contracts, no apologies, no strings attached. Just one simple truth. I don't need to be part of their family to have a real one of my own.